All right, well, here we are. Let me just highlight me. Here we go. There we go. Hi. Well, nice to see you guys. Thanks for showing up. At least some people have shown here. And the reason why my head is cut off this way is because this iPad's set up to show what I'm going to be working on. Well, at least part of what I'm working on. If you hear sirens, by the way, that's because we're very close to a hospital and it's noisy. So anyhow, hopefully it doesn't interfere too much. I'm hoping that you saw the stream that Stefan and I did last Friday. It was a lot of fun. It's always fun talking to him and, catching up with him. We do that regularly, but of course we don't always do it live like this. But we get onto FaceTime or what is it called? Messenger. Yeah. Sometimes we talk that way, and that's great to see him, and always fun to catch up on what he's doing. I'm hoping that the sound is better today. I did a few test records earlier, and when I played it back, the sound was clean. When I was listening to it, it was just a bit fuzzy. So I have a feeling there's kind of a strange connection in my headphone. It's sort of this Bermuda Triangle of weirdness. Anyhow, again, thank you guys for showing up, and I'm hoping this will go well. This is one of the more interesting subjects, in my opinion, when it comes to painting, because palette knife is one of those things that is sort of a great mystery for a lot of people, and they just end up fighting with it all the time, and they can't get the paint down the right way, and you end up dropping it on the floor, and it makes a mess everywhere. So it's a knife, right? So it's automatically you would think, oh, we're scared of that thing. But over many years of using it, I found that it's probably one of my most favorite tools, if not my favorite tool to use, because it's so versatile. There's so many things you can do with it. You can work with it almost like a brush. It's fabulous for mixing your paint, of course, and trying to get some nice clean color before you even start your painting. Goes back to the 17th century in the reading that I've done. It was basically an implement or a tool for mixing paint and moving pigment and so on around. Way back they were taking pigment and adding oil to the pigment, and this would be a tool for mixing. Of course, they ground pigment as well, but you could get this consistency that you wanted with this device, and it's a very, very handy thing for that. We can still do that. I find when I have too much oil in a tube, sometimes I'll squeeze that out onto onto paper towel, and when it's wet like that. And I really find that it's a great way to, spread the paint around with a palette knife on strong paper towel. Sucks the oil out of it. If you're working with cheaper brands or student grade, you find there's a lot of oil in those. If you're working with brands like Old Holland or say Michael Harding, you'll find that the consistency is better. I know that sometimes the Rublev has given me trouble with oil in it, but a good tip from a friend said that he said if you hang the tube with a clip upside down, the oil eventually works its way through the tube all the way to the back of it, and that seems to work quite well. I appreciate that tip. Okay, so what I'm going to do, you had a preview of what I may attempt to paint today, but there's lots of stuff to get through before I start actually painting an image. I want to show you the different kinds of palette knives that I use, And you know, this has grown over time. I realize that one palette knife doesn't do everything, although you can do a lot with one palette knife. I like to use a few different things that just, you know, push the paint around. And if you look at a lot of modern painters, guys like Alex Kanevsky, for example, you'll see that he uses large, well, I'm guessing that he uses palette knives, but he also uses probably a squeegee, I would think. I know if you look up Charlie Hunter, he uses a squeegee. And, oh, I've got to learn to stop saying so often. I've been looking at my videos afterwards, and every second word is So, I almost did it again. I'm going to really try not to say but I've already said it a bunch of times. Okay. Modern painting. I think we can use any kind of tool we want, and that could include a comb. You can just take a comb and scrape it through wet paint. That can include a fork, for example. You go to the kitchen, it has the best working tools of all, because you can use a spoon, you can use a fork, you can use a knife. Anything that you can put your hands on that will move paint around is a good thing. So if you, for example, were to take a lid off of a jar and just dip that into paint, you know, we used to do that when we were in kindergarten. When we were little kids, we'd make circles that way. And it was great. Those were fun to work with. We used to take potatoes and cut patterns into potatoes and make a print mechanism out of those. Those are really fun too. So anything that you can find, material that you can dip into paint and print with, that's all good. Anything that you can use to get the effect that you want is all good. So I'm going to show you a selection. It's by no means a comprehensive collection of palette knives, but they're ones that I use, and it's really fun just to keep trying different things. In fact, if you have 2 or 3 different knives in front of you at any given point in time, and you just switch up now and then, it changes the marks that you leave. So I'm going to bring the screen up on the knives that I have here. I'll just give this a solo layout. And you can see what I have here. It's a mess of paint tubes and some color and some palette knives. So I'm going to go through these one by one. And these are ones that I use pretty regularly. This is a size that I like a lot because it's good for mixing up a good batch of color ahead of time, and a little bit big for painting a lot with. I tend to use this one here more because it has a little bit more, I have more control with it. It's smaller. But if you're working on a larger painting, by all means, you can work with something like this, and I'm guessing it's like 3 inches or something like that. This is a variation on it, and I'll use this one now and then if I want to get something that's a little more refined. It's a little narrower. I quite like these rounded edges here. I prefer those over, for example, this kind of thing that's happening right here. There's just a little bit more forgiveness when you press into it. It rounds the edges out a little more. But sometimes you want something very precise like that. And sometimes you even want, oh, I have a palette knife that has gone missing. I don't know how that happened. Well, that's the studio. It just has a flat end. And it's not this one here. Well, I'm not going to hunt for it in your time. Another time. Oh, I just found it. Look at that. All right. I just have to look in the most likely situation. Okay. So there's this knife here. And I don't use this very often. And you can tell because the handle is so clean. But it's good if you wanted to paint, windows in, or if you want to create some lines that are very specific. You can use this one here, which is just like, it's kind of like painting with a little flat board. Recently, I've started working with these kind of devices, and it basically, this is they call it a catalyst. It's by Princeton brushes, and it's good quality. It's flexible on the end. You can see that. And when you really press into it, you can really move the paint around. This is just a smaller version of it. So a couple of variety of sizes. This you might recognize is, we call it a spatula. And this is the kind of thing you would use for icing. And when you're painting with a palette knife, it's almost kind of like you're moving icing around. All right, so this one here is just a giant, variation of one of these. And I like this. It's like a giant paintbrush, but it's just rubber. That's all it is. And I actually got this at Gerstecker in Vienna. This is 4 inches wide, or 10.16 centimeters. So this is really great if you're working on a larger piece. You want to drag through, soften edges. It's a fabulous tool. I want to demo a couple of things that you can do before I actually get into painting anything. All right, I'm going to collect these up and just put them over here. And I'll sort of grab these things randomly as I need them. I'm going to show you a couple of things that there's one more thing I want to show you. This is a great big daddy. Look at that. This is huge. It's something that you would use for plastering walls. And I like using this a lot. This is for larger paintings. It's brilliant. And since I have it out, I can show you one of the first things. This is kind of the neatest little trick or technique or whatever you want to call it for creating straight edges. And, we think of using a palette knife. We usually put paint on it and then put the paint down. Sometimes I'll take this device and just add paint to the edge of it in certain areas, wherever I want it. And then I can put it down and drag it, and I can control different colors this way. It's a really, I'll demo that. I'll show you how that works. But first I want to show you this little technique. So I want to create a straight edge. I'm going to dip into my paint over here, and I'm just going to run this along the edge like so, lift it up, and I've got my straight edge just like that. I can do that as many times as I want. This is fairly thin paint. If I put thick paint down, you'll see that the edge can be quite fine. I'm going to take the thinner out of my brush and just go into paint that's a little thicker. This is like a Viridian here. And I'm just going to paint along that edge there. And you can imagine trying to create an edge like that very quickly any other way. If I use a big wide brush, of course, it gives me a wider line. If I want a thinner line, I can just tickle the edge of it. And I can make this as transparent as I want. I have a lot of control with that. If you want to create a horizon line, something along that line, it's really a neat way to work. Sometimes you want to create lines in different directions. Of course, I'm going to take a stronger color, and I'm at the top of the two that I just did, and lift that up, and you can see I've got a nice clean line on one side. I can just turn it around the other way if I want to clean the line up on the other side. So that's kind of a fun technique to work with. You could do that with any straight edge, but I like this because it's a very thin, a strong, and also slightly flexible piece of metal. So it gives you lots of options. Okay, a nice fresh roll of paper towel out here. It doesn't, there we go. It sticks against my easel. You don't need to hear about all of this, but you know, an artist's life isn't always easy. All right. Okay, so that's the biggest one. I'm going to go right to this one here, which is usually one that I just use for mixing up paint. But I want to show you a kind of fun technique with this. And again, it's great for putting a couple of colors beside each other. I'm going to pick up, well, let's see, a little bit of this cad yellow, a bit more of that maybe. And beside that, very carefully, I could apply it with a brush, but see if I can do this, just picking it off the palette. I'm going to pick up another color, and just for the heck of it, I'll pick up another color. So if you look at that, I'll bring that up. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's 3 different colors on there. And I'm just going to drop this down and drag this that way. And as you can see, the orange is a fail. So I'm just going to go to the top again and pull that orange along the edge. Okay, well, just pick up some more orange. That might be the way to go. So I can do this as long as I line my palette knife up the right way. I can put 3 colors together. For some reason, that orange isn't very happy with me today, but that gives you an idea as to something that you can do with as many colors as you want to put on it, really. And the other thing that's good is that you can actually go back and scrape the color off again, and that gives you a very thin, transparent layer of color. As long as you're bringing your palette knife in the same direction, vertically I'm working here, those colors will stay consistent with each other. So I'm going to go back into that orange again because I want to clean that up and just run that in. This is Old Holland, so it's very thick. And so the consistency of it is so full of pigment. There we go. It looks a little better. Okay. It's Old Holland color. That's just like cost me $1 to make that mark. It's ridiculous how expensive it is, but it's beautiful paint. Okay. Now, if I want to take a shape like this, let's say I want to clean it up. So I'm gonna take my palette knife. I'm gonna put the paint down over here, and it's good to have like a palette area. You can really prepare an area that you can control. So I'm going to take this here, which is, by the way, the that's the Rublev. It's what do they call this? Italian green umber. Any umber is great. I tend to use umbers instead of black these days, or maybe I'll use a Payne's gray sometimes. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just taking the color, I'm flattening it out so it's very, very consistent in thickness. Then what I do is I get rid of the paint that's on my knife, really clean it up well. Now what I do is I take just one edge here and carefully drop it into that paint and pull away the amount of paint that I think I'm going to need. And if you look at that edge, you can see it's very consistent all the way through. Now, when I want to clean an edge up, what I'll do is I'll hold my hand steady. I move towards the color ever so slightly this way, and then I drop my knife down and I pull away. And look at the edge that I get out of that. It's absolutely crisp. I can go back into that again, get a little more paint, the same idea. I'm going to just drop it down here and drag it away. And you can see how crisp that edge is. I love the control that you can get with this device. I can go back in and just clean that one little bit right there so that I have really precise lines if I want that. Of course, you can take a brush and go around that and create, a consistent color. Oh yeah. Sasha, sorry, this thing has the autofocus. It's actually a webcam. So it's really a drag because I can't, as far as I know, I can't control the autofocus on that. So I hope you'll forgive me for that. Sorry. What I'll try to do, maybe what I can do is post a couple of photographs of these things so they're a little cleaner and you can see them better. I'm going to take some white here. I'm going to do the same thing and I spread it out. And you probably can't see that very well. But again, I want to have control. So I'm just going to take that paint and even over a darker color like this, I can create a nice clean edge like so. Just by dropping that in this way. So that's just a really nice technique. All right. All right. Yeah, sorry, you guys, about this autofocus thing. When I'm looking at now, I guess when I'm actually away, when I don't have anything down here, it's not trying to focus. It focuses on this area here. All right. Okay. So the other thing that you can do, of course, with a palette knife is you can create a nice crisp line. I'm going to go into this dark color because it's the easiest one. And I place my knife down and I push it this direction here and just turn the knife in as I go. I'm actually turning it right over so that more and more paint is left as I go. That gives me a very crisp edge like that. Yeah, it's just great. Okay. There's another thing. This should actually work well when it's not in focus. So there's always, a good way to see things. So I'm going to take a blue. This is a cobalt blue that I've got right here. And I'm going to put it over here. Well, let's see. Actually, I'll do it this way. Here's my blue. It's cobalt blue. And I'm going to grab some white. And I'm just going to put it here beside it. And I've shown you how you can make nice clean edges like this one here. This one I want to make a softer edge. So all I'm going to do is just take that cobalt blue and the white, and I'm going to work them back and forth against each other. Now what you see is a gradation from white all the way into the solid cobalt blue. And sometimes that's an effect that you can use really well for things like skies. Speaking of which, there's a set of knives I haven't shown you yet. So I've got some really big palette knives like this. So if I wanted to do this technique in a sky, I would use a knife that's really large like that. That's kind of a standard shape. Here's another shape that's interesting. You can just grab some paint, and you can either just drop it down like this, create these textures. You can create nice broken textures, especially if you're working over old paint, or if you have some texture down already, it's nice. And you can kind of push the paint with it to give you a straight edge this way. And then just fill the rest in with a brush if you want to. So these are handy knives. It has this small edge too, which is kind of neat. I'll just grab this and give you an example here. Just dragging this along with that small edge, and it's a beautiful effect. I really love that. I'm wondering if I bring the camera down a little bit, if you'll be able to see that better. I'm wondering if that helps. All right. It's a French palette knife. I didn't know that, Sasha. I know all of these knives have different names, but I don't know them all, that's for sure. I didn't work with a palette knife for years. Okay, you're asking about gouache. Yes, you could create a sky with gouache this way as well. As long as the paint is wet, or moist enough at least, yes, you can. Here's another funky kind of knife, which to me is kind of a strange knife, because I guess you'd have to be, well, they use these things in cooking, by the way, for flipping things over as well. So they're not just for painters. Sort of like, you know, a great little cookie flipper or something if you want. All right. Throw those over here. And I want to show you another soft approach, a technique with the palette knife. I'm gonna grab another one here. This is probably my favorite palette knife right here, because again, I can handle it well. It's small enough, you can get good control. I'm just going to take some yellow ochre here and put it down. By the way, my colors I'm working with, just in case you're curious, I've got titanium white. This is the titanium zinc mix, and it's Old Holland. I've got Winsor Newton cadmium yellow light. I've got cadmium yellow deep Old Holland. And then I've got a Norma paint, it's called, by Schmicke. And this is yellow ochre. Then I've got cadmium orange with Old Holland. I have a Viridian here with Luca Studio, and the Rublev umber there, just in case you want to know what colors I'm working with today. So I'm going to grab some of this Cad Yellow Deep. I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to do what I would call kind of a scumbling motion, and probably got a little bit more paint than I need there. Just going to clean that off. And I'm working in a circular motion here, and you can get some very soft transitions of color this way. Let's bring in just a bit of green, a bit of Viridian, just to see what we can do with that. I'm going to start at one end, and again, in a circular motion, pressing down, but not too hard. I can bring that green in. Again, try to keep my palette knife as clean as I can as I go through this. You can see just how smooth those transitions can be. I'm going to bring in some white here, so that'll cool and lighten that yellow. And just work it this way. And get some very subtle color this way. If you find you've got too much paint down, you can even just scrape it away like that. So this is really neat because you can really control this. It's a scraping tool as well as a painting tool. And if I want to, I can scrape lines through it with the other side of it, or the handle, which gives you a little different look altogether. Of course, remember to clean the handle off when you grab your palette knife or before you grab it again. If I don't like what I see there, if I want to soften it, I can just go over it with that action again and make that disappear. When I do, if I've pressed in hard enough, you see just a ghosting of the color that sits in the grooves. It's very, very subtle. You probably can't see that, especially if it's out of focus. Sometimes I like to dip my palette knife in medium, and this is like half linseed, half thinner. And just take that medium, and again, with the same circular motion, I can really cover a large area. And you can see when I do this, I've got one area that's more opaque, the other area that's more transparent. It's very subtle again. Let's see what happens when I scrape this. I get these really interesting transparent effects that happen this way. And if I need to put some serious paint down to make something pop, I can just lay it in right over top. You're also getting a little bit of glare on this. I'm just going to change the angle of this light a little, see if it makes a difference. Oh, I'm not sure how much that helps. Makes it darker in the room for me, but it seems to look better on the screen. Okay. All right. So this is really fun because there's just so many things that you can do with this. There's another thing I like to do sometimes. I'm going to take a little bit of, well, let's see. I'll take a green. I'm going to take a darker green. I've got Viridian here. And I'm going to put a bit of cad yellow light here. And it just makes up a nice green. Pretty bright. Good chroma. And then what I want to do is I want to take a color. Maybe I want to take a, well, let's say a blue. I want to take this cobalt blue. And I want to run it through. And as I run it through the wet paint, it's going to change the color. And I'm going to turn my knife down as I go. So I'm running it straight up. And I'm going to turn my knife down straight. And you get those kind of things happening. If I go back into that blue now, I can create a little more. Let's bring a little bit of medium into that, just a touch, so it spreads better. I'm going to just gently rub this out. And as I come down into the color, I'm going to turn my knife up again. And I get a nice, clean, thin edge. Get very thin edge with this, I want. Sometimes you're trying to make like, I don't want to show you a way of making leaves or trees or, it's like not a Bob Ross show. But it doesn't hurt to play with these tools to figure out what they'll do for you. And this is really the best way to learn. It's really so much fun. When you do get control of your palette knife, you can lay in thick areas like this. I can really cover that dark up. The more I go into it, the more the color underneath comes through. Okay, so I can just keep working that color underneath, letting it come to the surface. On the other side, it's a little lighter. And, as thick as this is, I can still go back in and I can drop in a spot of color like that. That's so crisp. And I can bring in some more white beside that. And that's so crisp. And it's sort of got like one shot at it at this stage. But if you don't like it, yeah, it's just that easy. Just get rid of it and do it again. So I know this. You go through lots of paint when you do this, by the way. That's okay. It's just really about painting and learning what you can do with these techniques in order to take you further along in your painting tools, I would say, techniques. Someone might want to paint, a stand of trees or something. One of the things that I like to do, this is kind of fun. And again, this is a technique I show the students in my courses. A lot of people struggle with water. So I'm just going to do a very quick little thing here to show you a way that you can imitate water. It's not replicating, it's imitating it, but it's an idea. So I'm going to take this darker color here, and I'm just going to drop in some kind of landscape here. It's probably upside down for you. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, well, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to paint this upside down. What the heck? All right, so I'll paint it so that when I'm looking at the screen, it should look right for you. That's the idea. No. So, yeah, it is upside down. Okay, all right. So I'm going to take some of this green that I had over here. I'm going to create a little bit of a landform, a bit of landscape, and just taking whatever bits of paint I can find to give it the sense of something going on. I want to throw in a bit of sky, grab some of that blue that I have. So I'm just going to paint in a little bit of sky in behind these trees. I realize I am painting this upside down. Okay, so when you watch this, you have to turn your camera upside down. No, this is going to work. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, this should be my water here, because there's the blue. It's very strange painting upside down. Many years ago, I did a course. It's kind of like an upside down course. And I would paint in front of the students, and they would have to follow all the moves that I was making, which really sounds kind of ridiculous, well, paint a triangle here and paint the square here or whatever. That's what they were doing. And what I was doing was I was painting a face upside down, and nobody knew until almost right at the end that it was a face. When they turned it up, they had a face that was looking at them. And it was really fun, actually. It was a fun class and a fun group of people. If we paint by shape instead of the things we think we know, it actually looks better. So I'm just going to create a little bit of a line here. And I want to create kind of a... Now this is going to have like a yellow sky. This is going to be the weirdest looking landscape you've ever seen. Some trees here. Now okay, now it's starting to work better. I'm looking at it upside down. I want to throw in some kind of foliage, some kind of tree formations here. And this is a little technique, by the way, I wanted to show you. That's the point of all of this, is when you use your palette knife this way. So I'm just going to do this kind of thing. And all I'm doing is moving the paint up a little. And working with this movement here, I can control the upper part of it. And it kind of gives a sense of a tree line. Now for reflections, of course, whatever is happening here is going to happen below. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of that color there, and I'm going to drop it into the water area. And I need a little more paint. A little more of that green, a little bit more of that yellow, kind of a mucky yucky color. All right. And I just want to put a little bit more of that into the water area. And you can see all I'm doing is just moving this knife up and down so that you get these verticals that happen. And then you can use your palette knife to create a sense of reflection. Now the sky up here isn't blue, so I really should make it blue. Let's just do that. It's going to be like a blue-green by the time I'm done. And if I move my knife that way to create the trees, I can also come from above the same kind of action. And I can create some sky that way. Looking at this upside down in front of me, but when I look in the screen, it looks like it's right side up. Is that like kind of the weirdest way I've ever painted? You know, going live like this is the strangest thing because you never know if anything's going to work or not. If it does, you get off later and think, you know, the stars. If it doesn't work, well, at least you saw the effort. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go now into the water. I want to create a sense of reflection in the water. All I'm going to do is run my knife back and forth against it this way. And as I do, the brighter, lighter colors, those reflections come into the foreground. And of course, because the autofocus is making a mess of all of this, it probably looks way better than it really is. Anyhow, that gives you an idea. It's just working your knife this way and then this way in order to create these movements, these directions that imitate water. And if you want to pull out a light tree here or there, you can always do that. Scrape it in. All right. Okay. Okay. Now, I think what I want to do, that's probably enough of those little things to show you. And again, there's one other thing. Yes, I just forgot. You know, I put a little list up to remind me of things that I really should show you. Sometimes you want to put a very precise little dot down or a pattern of some kind. Maybe it's the highlight in someone's eye. And believe it or not, the brush for me is just like, I get so nervous when I use a brush because it ends up being like a blob. Whereas with the palette knife, you can really get control. So I'm just I've got a dark area here. I'm going to pick up the smallest amount of paint and just tap. I can really, I don't know how well you can see that. I better make it bigger. So I can just tap down into that. Okay, this is an interesting thing because this paint underneath is still so thick that I need to thin it down so I can put something thicker over it, right? Thick over thin. That's the rule. And with the knife, you get nice random marks. Or if you want something that's very controlled, you can tap down like so. And then you just tap around the outside of it, like that. And I find that you have more control this way than, this is just me. I'm not saying everyone should do this, but I have more control with it this way than I do with a brush. Because what I see with a brush are brush strokes, whereas with a palette knife, I don't see brush strokes. I just see little textures that end up creating value changes. So I can really get a nice sense of control and build up my highlight where I want it to be in that kind of manner. Okay. All right. I want to show you, I just happened to have this kicking around the studio because I'd done a demo to show how you could do clouds with a palette knife. And I'll just pull this out of the way here. No waste there. I'll use that board to paint over something with some other image. So this is a little cloud that I did just with that scumbling technique that I showed you. And at the very end, I just took a brush and just wiped it down through the lower part of this. And that gives a sense of, maybe a cloud in the sky. All right, I'm seeing a few people here. See Isabel Wittig. Nice for you to show. All right. Okay, so now what I want to do is I've actually pre-mixed a bunch of colors. I'll show you what they look like because I want to work on this little image that I showed at the very beginning. But I got to get my light to work again here. Sorry. Wow. That thing is stuck nicely. Okay. I get a little more glare when I do this. Okay, so these are a bunch of colors that I've mixed up ahead of time. And I used a palette knife to mix all of those. And again, another great use for your palette knife. You get nice clean color. You can really control your color this way. And whenever you're doing something like grayscales or color charts, use a palette knife and get used to using it. And the more you use it, the more comfortable you'll feel with it and the more effective you'll be with it in your paintings. So I'm just going to turn that light away so there's a little less glare. And in doing that, I turned my camera too. Okay. Can pretty much see the colors I'm working with there. All right, now what I'm going to do is show you okay, so that's the image that I'm hoping to paint. And, if it doesn't work out, well, it doesn't work out. I've mixed a bunch of colors ahead of time. I'm going to attempt to paint as much as I can with a palette knife. I may use a brush now and then to soften a couple of areas, but primarily I want to work with my palette knives. So let's just see how that goes. The colors that I'm using the Rublev, which of course is my umber, and I'm using cobalt blue. This palette that I have out here is all I have, which is plenty. And I've been able to get those colors there out of that palette. And they're, for the most part, the colors that are going to appear in this painting. Okay, I'm going to switch the camera here and hope this works just fine. Back camera. If I haven't jostled this around too much, it should be in the right position. Not too bad. Okay. And I'm going to highlight that so that you can see what that looks like. Okay. So what I did here initially was just to take some cat orange and put it down in a very thin way, just to give myself a sense of what that's going to look like. Let me try some. There we go. That's probably better. That way you can see what I'm attempting to paint. And you can see that I've left a few areas light so that I'm not having to paint over a whole bunch of orange. Okay. All right. So the first thing I want to do is establish a value range and get things working in a very simple way. I may go with a little larger knife just to get these first bits down. All right. So I'm going to go into the darkest dark that I have, which is the Rublev, and there's a bit of cobalt blue in it and Viridian. And I just want to kind of draw this out as best I can. Try and get my, proportions in the right places. And one thing about the palette knife is you know pretty quickly whether it's going to work or not. In a painting, once you get things down, you just press into it and just get it done. So now I'm sort of painting around my iPad here, so it's an interesting challenge. I'm going to dip this into a bit of medium so that I've got a little bit of transparency happening here. I'm going straight for my darks right away. Establish those. And I'm just letting the paint drip down. This is not, you think of a palette knife, you tend to think of everything going down thick. Fair enough, but you can paint thin with it too if you've got some medium on your knife. I'm not painting over textures. I'm creating textures with my palette knife. So that's just something to think about. I can bring additional color in very quickly. I'm going to bring in a little bit of a blue to create a little more depth and interest in the shadow areas. Again, dip into my medium, and that's the one with the oil and thinner. Now, if I was doing this with a brush, this would be full of brush strokes right now, and which kind of makes sense when you think about it. But I really want to keep this kind of texture because for me, Venice, which is where this is just full of texture. So I'm going to save the finer bits for the end. Maybe they'll go in with the brush, maybe they'll go in with a palette knife. I want to establish the darks on the other side over here. So let's start in here. And I'm drawing with the palette knife. Why not? We draw with other kinds of awkward tools. Why not, paint with your palette knife or draw with your palette knife? So I think the first few times you use a palette knife, it feels like you're trying to paint with a brick. So it's just really strange thing. It's like, why in the world would you use such an awkward device? But in the long run, really what you're trying to do is you're trying to create shapes and values that imitate the thing that's in front of you. So it doesn't matter how you get to them. In fact, the tools that are awkward force you to focus on the big shapes, and they leave their own marks, their own textures. Painting is noisy, isn't it? Just realize. When you're doing this outdoors, you've got other noises that take over. It's not as bad. In the studio, you're getting all the echoes. I'm going to bring a little more of that blue into it here as well. I'm going to bring in a touch of a lighter color just because it feels like it would be nice. And I'm going to bring in a couple of lights in here. Well, I should just leave it right there. Is it abstraction? Thin palette knife painting is for sissies. Thanks, Stefan. Well, I'm officially a sissy because there's some thin palette knife. I'll put some thin near the end. Nice to see you, Stefan. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to take a color that is just a little bit lighter, and I'm going to drop that in here. It's not very much lighter, so maybe I need to lighten it up a little more. I'm a little nervous now. I've got Stefan the Maestro watching. Oh boy. We've painted much together over the years, and I still am always kind of blown away with what this guy does with his work. That's Newts. It's a little thicker now, but not very. Okay. Okay. Now I want to establish where my lights are going to be. I want to get a sense of where my lightest lights will be. So I'm just going to put something in here that I think will be right in around here. And go into some greens, bluey greens in this area here. All right. This is a bully, and he's pretty tough guy. I take him on in a wrestling match, but he's not here, so sadly. It'd be nice to see him here. Any of you want to come to Canada, like just, let me know. Greet you at the airport. I'll find a nice place for you to stay. Just kidding. So I'm just throwing some greens in here. And again, because it's a palette knife, I don't have a chance to sort of get too fussy with it. It's just really doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to throw some light up in the sky, which is going to be directly above that. And this is weird because I'm working sort of from the extremes here, from the lights to the darks to the lights, and then finding the midtones in between. And really, it's kind of counterintuitive to the way the old masters would work. Sargent used to work from the mid values out, and it sure worked for him, saving the extremes till the end. But let's just see if we can do something the opposite to Sargent and make it successful. Well, okay. I'm going to take a little more of this color here, drop it in. Now, one of the things with palette knife painting is it can be kitschy. Yeah, you really have to watch that it doesn't get too like pretty and just all technique-y. It's dangerous. I like the effects that I get, but I also want to make sure that it doesn't look like street art, somehow. Not that there's anything wrong with street art, but it should have a certain quality to it that feels like, this person taking it serious and has the skills to do this. I'm not sure if that's how that's going to go today, but let's just see. Okay, I'm establishing a few mid-tones here. I want to go into something a little bit darker in here. And I'm going to use the palette knife to mix it up, bring in a little bit more warmth, bring in a touch more orange. So right now I'm really just playing to get the values right and creating texture with not from what's underneath, which is what I usually like to do. So it's good to push yourself, get yourself a little bit uncomfortable. That's where you learn. Thanks, Sasha. Angelica's out dancing. Like, is that really more important than this? Well, okay. Well, if you probably is actually. Why did I ask that question? All right. The nice thing about YouTube and what we're doing here is that we can go back and look at this anytime if you can stand watching it again. Or if you haven't watched it, you know someone else who you think might like to watch it, then by all means send them the link. Tell them to subscribe. That's something that would be really nice. Gets really orange down in here. Best part about Venice is everything's all kind of dirty and mucky anyhow. So I'm not going to comment, Sasha, on that one. Okay. Now I want to punch a bit of this bright yellow. I want to get a sense of where the high chroma is going to be in this painting. It's going to be somewhere. Actually, when I look at it, my drawing really sucks, so it should be way up here. So this is going to be the center of attention if it goes okay. And now I want to put some dark spots in where I see them. Bottom of this little street here. Bringing more medium into it. More transparent. And punch in a little bit of color in here. And that dark area finds its way into the water. This is a weird way to paint, but it's fun. What the heck? Okay. Just going to get this wall going here. Thank goodness it's Venice and not like some super modern buildings, because this is a lot easier than trying to paint buildings that are all straight and perfect. So I just really want to cover things as much as I can. I just want to, get rid of that color that's coming through underneath. And if I wasn't trying to be so clever with a palette knife, I'd probably get out a brush and do some brush work right now. But you know what? I'm going to take this as far as I can with a palette knife before I get a brush going, if I get a brush going. here. See some orangey things. Lighter though. Okay. I'm starting to have fun. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I'm having fun. What the heck? Sort of impressionist feeling. The palette knife. And of course, you're looking at the image that I'm painting from, and you can see where all my drawing problems are. I've got to get my sky working a little better. That's interesting. I'm missing a shape. Okay, well, that's the joy of a palette knife, right? So I'm going to scrape that there and see if I can get some blue going over that. Now, blue over orange, that should be tricky. Of course, no one says that I have to paint exactly what I see, right? But let's see what we can do. It's funny because the reference I'm working from in my little iPad mini looks different than what you're looking at here on the screen. So I'm going to do a compilation of the two because I do like that shape better. Oh, that's sweet. Okay. Just sort of that little chimney shape that happens in the image you're looking at. So next time I should really make sure I have the reference that you're looking at to be the same as the reference I'm looking at. All right. Hey, Jerry, nice to see you. It's a rainy day, sort of, in Toronto right now, so Jerry's inside, I presume, because, you know, you can't go out and paint outdoors today or walk around in nature, which he's been doing a lot lately along the Hamilton Escarpment area. So some great photos you had, Jerry, from that experience. Okay. I can go back in, take stuff away that I put in. Sometimes the incidental things like that are the things that look the best, quite frankly. The accidents that you have to be happy for. I've got to get my values working a little better. In this area here, I had a little white on my knife. I don't know how to draw buildings anymore. I'm looking at this and realizing this building has to come down farther. Okay, we'll just make it come down further. That's all. What the heck? Okay, then I'm going to put a little bit of dark in underneath there to accent that there, because there's a bit of perspective that happens in this zone that I think is a little bit important. Take your eye back that way. And of course, that building's going to have to come down further because of the correction I made. So I'm just going to scrape over that dark, get rid of some of that, and bring in a color that might work there. Huh. Almost works. Bring it a little bit more here. Okay. There's this interesting color here that I need to put in. It's sort of a yucky lighter color. And maybe it picks up somewhere over there. I don't know. And sound you hear, by the way, all the time is just me cleaning my knife off constantly on paper towel. And when you work with a palette knife, you really need to do that because you've got a lot of paint going and it will be everywhere if you're not careful. Now I'm just kind of mushing it all together, create some texture. I just want to get something to cover everything. Maybe it doesn't really look like that, but then again, maybe it looks like that today. Jerry, you're staying dry. That's good. Steeltown Stomp in Hamilton. Hamilton is a great city. There are some people can't stand Hamilton. It's mostly Torontonians who have never been there, don't know how great it can be. Hamilton's a place, for those of you who are listening, that is about an hour away from Toronto, and it was a steel town. And there's some very beautiful places there. And the Niagara Escarpment, which is a beautiful nature preserve, I would guess you'd call it, runs for hundreds of kilometers in directions away from Hamilton, all the way up north. And it's just beautiful to go hiking there. So I'm just dropping a couple of windows in, not even in the right place. Doesn't matter. I don't really care, honestly. It's just, I want it to look like Venice feels. I don't need to make it look exactly like what I see in front of me, because if I wanted to do that, I would just go take a camera and take a photo, right? So I don't have to do that. I can get paint out and make my own scene, but using the reference that I have to give me a sense of the structures. Okay, I'm going to get a little more oomph into the greens that happen up here, a little more detail. And over here as well. Those greens are important. They kind of offset all those oranges that are just so strong. Okay. It's very strange to look at the screen and see what my painting looks like versus what the image looks like. It's a little disconcerting. I'll put the hint of a roof line in there. I'm not going to put any pigeons in, promise. Although there are lots of them there. Okay. I want to get a few more of these darks going. And this wall, it's a big opening right here somehow. And there's another sort of roundy out kind of door thing happening over here. Comes down almost to there. It does come to the water. And then there's a bit of a light that picks up there. And under the window, there's a light too. Interesting. A couple more lights to give us a sense of that perspective. There. A couple more darks above it. Rita, thanks for checking in. Better late than never. Nice to see you. Okay. Now I've got a whole bunch of dark stuff happening on the other side over here. But I'm going to sort of focus first on the center of attention area with the focal area, which is in here. I will get that working because I want us to be looking back at this painting. So our eye takes us into the distance. And your sharpest edges and most detail go to the focal area, to the focal point. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're painting. You'll notice I'm still using this great big palette knife. It's keeping me bold without getting too fussy. Put a little window here, another little window beside it. Again, working with a palette knife sometimes feels like you're painting with a brick, but it does leave some very unique and interesting marks that I would never do with a brush. And for that reason, I like using them. As I go a little higher, the windows get a little lighter. All right. Okay. Starting to feel like canal-y. Not cannoli, canal-y. Like Venice-y. All right. Still feel like I need to bring, okay, windows up and above here. I'm working the water right now, but I have to make sure I get these windows in that are here. So there's one here. Whoop, that's a big one. Wow. Let's get rid of that. See, just like so. And drop another one there. Oh, maybe it's just one window. What the heck? There's another one there. There's another one a little higher. Up in there somewhere. Oh. Okay, well, not over on the side of the building. So let's just cover that little mistake. If I can. Yeah, just get rid of that. Pop a little window up here. It looks like everything's wet. It's all runny all over the place. Okay. Now I want to get back into windows on the other side. I'm going to bring in some other colors here. Just a little more of the cobalt blue, because I think that'll make it more interesting. I want to line my windows up so that there's a sense of perspective. Come way up this way. And there's just little bits of hints of windows here. And here too. And they get a lot bigger as they get closer to us. There's a couple of smaller ones right near the upper edge. And you can see I'm just really trying to draw this with my palette knife, because if you work it all out ahead of time, well, then all you're doing is you're just like filling in the blanks, right? It's like coloring books. But if you paint this way, nothing is resolved until you decide it's done. And I think it's really important to give yourself a chance to make mistakes and explore the subject. When you explore the subject this way, it's more honest. It's not about technique. It's about looking at the image and getting a feel for it. If you want to be architecturally accurate, okay, it's okay. Some people love doing that. But I'm at this stage really more interested in finding the feeling that I get from this place. And in the end, you end up with a more effective painting, in my opinion, because you compliment the viewer, right? The viewer looks at it and says, oh, it feels like Venice. Guy doesn't know how to draw a straight line, but, still feels like Venice. So he should have used a brush. Now I'm getting, this is almost a little fussier than I want to be, but, it just gives us a little sense of what might be happening in the water. Play with it. Don't get so serious that you have to get it, everything perfect, whatever perfect is. It's just get the feeling working. There's a bright hit of red right over here. It's interesting. Oh, I see it's the edge of a boat or something. Well, I'm just going to put it in there. Why not? It's one of the joys of painting. When you're working on things like this, you suddenly see things. You think, I don't know what that is. And then you have to look at it more carefully and realize it's a boat. But you don't have to put the whole boat in. You can just put a shape in, the kind of shape you would see in your peripheral. And when you do that, the viewer can figure it out if they want to. And if they can't figure it out, as long as it feels like an authentic scene of some kind, that's okay. The window that I'm looking at doesn't look anything like what I just painted in. But I'm just going to do this because it feels right. And if I don't like it, which that one I don't really like much, I'm just going to get rid of it and cover it over with another color. There we go. There's some really nice little lights that happen at the top of these windows. They're just picking up on the lintel. Something that happens down here, a little darker shape that happens above it. That's a bigger window there. So when you're working this way, the colors underneath come through as well. So inadvertently, you end up with and color harmony is a great thing to have because it pulls your painting together. Now you can see what I'm doing here. I'm actually scraping out paint to clean up the windows a little more there, give them a little more definition. Remember I showed you that in the sample earlier on of pulling paint away from the edge to clean up an edge. So this is a good place to do this sort of thing. I want to clean things up. That little window up top, I can just sneak up on the edge of it and pull the paint away. If you have enough paint down, you can do this sort of thing. And that gives me real definition there. Okay. Good question. Do I use a Dutch angle sometimes? I presume you mean the piece of rubber. This thingy right here. That. Sometimes I do. Yeah, if that's what you're talking about. I could use it, for example, here. If I want to take an area and just smooth it out a little more, pull the paint away, I can do that sort of thing. And that's fun. So thanks for reminding me I had that tool. And this is a nice thing that you can use just to create a bit of softness. I think that's the tool you're talking about, I'm hoping. Anyhow, there it is. Okay. I'm going to, what time is it? 3:27. All right. What I'd like to do, I've taken this far enough to give you at least the idea. And what I'd like to do is finish this a little bit in my own time, if that's okay. I'm going to come back to you. Hang on. Here, cam. There we are, front cam. Okay. So we're almost at the 1.5 hour mark. I'm going to just do this. There we go. All right. I don't want to keep going and going on this. I think you get the general idea. I'm going to take it a little further in my own time. When I'm painting around the iPad like this, you can see I get paint on my hands and all over the place. Anyhow, that's what a painter does. So when I'm painting around the iPad like this, it's a bit awkward and strange. I'd like to be able to get back from this and look at it properly and spend a little more time. What I'll do is either a time lapse of sorts, or maybe just continue painting and then post the finished work with the link so people can watch at least how it started. I hope today that you learned some things about palette knives and some techniques that might be helpful for you. I really love working with these things. The more I work with them, the more I find there's stuff you can do that I hadn't thought about. Like, you know, working with two palette knives, of course, you can keep your paints really clean. If you're adding one color to another, you just keep one for your light colors, another for your dark, and keep wiping them off. In combination with brushwork, palette knife can be very beautiful because the brush has this softness, and of course the palette knife has the hard edges, and it's kind of like a symphony of different sounds and different edges that work together. And I think that anything that you can do that way that keeps the viewer interested and keep them involved in your painting is a way of building success into your paintings. It's really, really fun to work with palette knives or any other device that is not a brush. Like, just put your brushes down and paint with something else. Like, just try some different things. Even if it doesn't work, it's okay, because what it does is it pushes you outside of your comfort zone. And, you know, we get too comfortable doing the same sort of fiddly little thing all the time. And I'm not insinuating that's what you do, because I don't know who's watching, but I know some of my students are really, you know, very precise and fiddly and careful. And then when it doesn't work, they're so disappointed. Do a lot of smaller paintings and just work at them that way. Give yourself a chance to make mistakes and fail, because that's really, you will learn more from your mistakes than you do your successes. Let's face it. If you were successful all the time, then you would never learn anything. So we learn from our failures, and that happens in all parts of our lives, sadly, but it's true. So somebody, okay, Rita, you're saying that the Dutch angle is the way you paint houses. They're not straight, but an angle of a defined angle. I forgot the grade of this angle. Okay, I'm not familiar with it, but I will look it up. Could be interesting. I'm always learning every time. Whenever I'm doing something like this, people have questions that I hadn't thought about. Of course, that's the joy of teaching, learning through teaching. Okay, so I want to thank you again for showing up today. Please pass the link on to friends. Let people know about this. It's free. And I'm happy to share what I can. The only thing I'm asking is that you share this with others, let others know, subscribe. And only thing I ask you to do is to show up when you can. So every Friday, as long as I can, I will keep doing this. And I'm hoping that some of the stuff that you're learning here, will be good for you, and maybe it'll be good for others. There are lots of students who can't afford classes. This is a way that they can, see how painting works, at least from my point of view. There are lots of great videos out there. If you don't know Stefan's work, by any chance, if you're watching, Stefan Nutzel, look him up. He's got some great videos out there, some really fine instruction. And I guess I'm looking forward to finishing this up and seeing you guys next time. Be well, stay safe. We're in the middle of this crazy pandemic thing, and the news is better one day and worse the next, and it's a real yo-yo. So just please stay safe, protect yourself, and in that way you also protect others. Have a great weekend, and Auf Wiedersehen for those of you who are calling in from Germany and Austria, and goodbye to all of you from Canada and US. I know there are people from all over here today. Thanks. Take care. Bye.